A little while back, I reached out to Kasaca Sports asking them if I could do a paddle review for them. And this weekend, they sent me 3 different paddles to test out and try. So we're gonna be unboxing these and playing with them and finding out, are these paddles from Amazon as good as they say they are? So let's open these up and find out what we got. So this first paddle is their $70 edgeless carbon fiber paddle. So it has a carbon fiber face with a polypropylene honeycomb core. It's a thin paddle at 13 millimeters and it's just above 8 ounces. So upon opening this, I was actually surprised that this came with a paddle cover, because even when you buy expensive paddles, getting a paddle cover to come complimentary with it is not something that you normally see. So these are super nice to have. They keep your paddle from getting scratched, but the most important thing is that they make your grit last longer. So opening this up, this is a super thin paddle. It's 13 millimeters, but the one thing that sticks out to me the most is the grit on this paddle. It has a ton of surface grit, so getting topspin or any spin at all on this paddle is going to be extremely easy. So this next one is their $130 carbon fiber edgeless AeroSwift paddle. So opening this one up, this one also has a paddle cover. This paddle definitely stands out, showing carbon fiber throughout the entire face of the paddle. So this is an edgeless paddle, but near the top of it, it has rubber-like material on the top 2 corners that create a little protective surface. And if you're someone who's played with an edgeless paddle, you've probably experienced your paddle getting beat up or chipped in the front of the paddle. The other thing that stands out a lot to me is the arrow hole. The most common paddle that's notoriously known for this is the Selkirk paddle. You've probably seen someone playing with this before, and it normally is just one hole. This one has a split down the middle, so it's 2 separate holes, and I'm very interested on how this plays because I've actually never seen this before. And this last paddle is another AeroSwift paddle, but in a different colorway. So again, it comes with the paddle case, but this one is the red, white, and gray version. One thing that I do want to point out in these 2 similar AeroSwift paddles is the consistency and grit. If you've ever purchased the same paddle over and over again from the same company, you've probably noticed that the grit is inconsistent, some being super gritty, some having no grit at all. So the consistency in between all of these paddles was very consistent, so that is definitely a +1. So I went to Gilbert Regional Park with a solid group of 4 to test out these paddles. The first one I was playing with is the 13 millimeter $70 paddle. And right off the bat, I knew it was going to be hard to control my dinks and drops, but I really didn't have that much of a problem moving the ball around and hitting it much softer than I would with a normal 16 millimeter paddle. But when it came to serve returns, drives, and overheads, you can see I'm having no problem putting these balls away. But we had quite a few good rallies. Here's just a short little hands battle, and just anytime I get the ball onto my paddle, I'm just able to hit it with so much power without barely any backswing. So this is a very good paddle when it comes to hitting counters or any hands battle, any drive. You can see I'm getting good backhand flicks with it, and just moving them around the court is very, very easy. You can see every serve return is super deep, and anytime the ball comes up, I'm able to counter the ball extremely well and just put it away almost every single time. You can see here I got a few good drives in, and I'm having no problem taking this ball out of the air at the kitchen, which is pretty hard to do with a thinner paddle. But this is a pretty crazy point. We do get lobbed right here. I end up recovering that, but I don't end up putting this away. Just trying to keep the point alive at this point, and I screw it up. This is another good point right here. You can see I just get that easy counter out of the air, that backhand roll. He pops it up, and I'm off balance, and I'm still able to put that ball away with just a slight flick of the wrist. But here's another one. Good drive, and then I put it away. So here I get a deep serve in and a nice 2-hand backhand drop. After that, he counters it. I keep the point alive, and that is that. We're now switching over to the 3K carbon paddle, but as I was doing so, someone almost knocks over my really tall tripod, which would have been really bad. But this is me playing with a 3K carbon paddle. I really liked this paddle. It was a ton of control, a good amount of power, and I got 2 ATPs this game. So that's the first one, super clean. This next one, I get a really, really nice drop here. It's hidden halfway in the kitchen, and we get into a nice dinking battle. So we get 1 net cord right there. Me and Jordan are going back and forth with it. 2-hand backhand, 1-hand backhand. Another net cord right here, and a backhand ATP. So that same night, me and Dawson did some drilling. We were testing out all 3 paddles. Here's me dinking with 13 millimeter. We did some cross courts, we did some counters, some putaways, some drops, and hands battles. But here's me doing some cross court dinking to some counters. So now we are both testing out the Air-Swift paddles. I'm using the T700 right now. He's using the 3K Carbon. He's driving and dropping them. I'm just playing some defense at the kitchen line, feeding them back. So after I had Dawson test out both of the Air-Swift paddles, he told me that they feel a lot like an all-court paddle. So it's a good medium between power and control, leaning more towards that control side. So you can see here, he's putting a ton of drops in, and I'm just feeding them back over and over again. But the control on these paddles is very, very nice. And the grid on them allows you to get that good topspin to just let it easily curve over the net. But after that, we just drove for the rest of the night and got some work in on both of the paddles. So I played a few games with these paddles. Now it's finally time to talk about what I like and what I don't like about these paddles. So we're gonna start off with the $70 13 millimeter paddle. So I'm personally not a fan of 13 millimeter paddles, but I have played with quite a few of them. And any paddle that's 13 millimeters, has a carbon fiber face, and a honeycomb core is gonna play very similar to this one. I've played with other 13 millimeter paddles that are over $130, and this one plays almost identical. It is definitely a power paddle. The drives and overheads with this were a lot harder than it is with the other two, but that's very expected since it's 13 millimeters. I like it. I think for a 13 millimeter paddle, it plays very similar to other expensive paddles on the market. And the only thing I would probably change about it is maybe a longer handle so you could have a better two-hand. But other than that, this is a great paddle for $70. So to give this paddle a rating for what it is, I'm gonna give it a 8 out of 10 stars. So now we're gonna talk about the $130 3K Carbon and T700 Carbon 16 millimeter paddles. So like I said in the beginning, these are gonna draw a lot of attention. When I was playing with these at the court, a lot of people were asking me where I got them, and I let a few people actually try out these paddles. In my opinion, these are more of a control paddle, but they still hit harder than most carbon paddles on the market. And I think the 3K Carbon hits a little bit harder than the T700 Carbon, but other than that, these paddles are very, very similar. So now I wanna talk about one thing I like and one thing I don't like about this paddle. So one thing I really like that's very different from any paddle I've ever seen is the divide between the hole on the paddle. And the reason I like this so much is that when you're doing a two-hand backhand and you put your second hand on the paddle, that actual divide that splits the hole into two basically makes it feel like there's no hole in the paddle. So instead of your finger resting above an empty space, you're actually resting on the entire paddle face. So I don't know if that's something that other people have experienced with a paddle that has a hole in it, but for me, I thought that was super interesting, and it definitely changes the way that this paddle feels when using it. So one thing I don't like about these paddles is the stock grip out of the package is very, very slippery. So I always put an over grip or change out the stock grip of a paddle, but just straight out of the package, this grip just isn't my favorite. I just feel like if I were to hit a really hard overhand, I'm kind of scared that it's gonna slip out of my hand, and I'm not really someone who ever has that problem with a paddle, so I would definitely be changing out the grip if I were to play with this paddle more often. So to give these paddles a rating, I'm gonna go with this one first. I give this paddle a 8 out of 10, only because this paddle is very, very similar, but has all of the better qualities. It hits harder and it still maintains that control. So I give this paddle a 9.5 out of 10. I really, really like the 3K Carbon paddle, while this one is just lacking in the power. But this paddle is very similar to the first paddle I ever played with, minus the hole in it. But other than that, I love this paddle. I'm honestly gonna play quite a few games with it and see if this is something that I would use more often. But I like this paddle a lot. This one is just a little less powerful, so maybe this one for doubles and this one would be a great singles paddle. But other than that, these are great medium paddles in between power and control, and for 130 bucks, you really can't go wrong. This is a great paddle to have. So that wraps it up for today. Shout out to Kasaca Sports for hooking me up with these paddles and making this video possible today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will be leaving a link in the description if you are interested in purchasing these paddles for yourself. But other than that, don't forget to leave a like, drop a comment if you have any questions, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.